Well, hello there. It's always good to see a new face around the camp. Allow me to be the first to welcome you to Camp Nowhere, a respite for all that happen upon it. You were no doubt on some manner of adventure, no? Then rest your legs and have a seat here at the campfire of the lost. I can tell by the look in your eyes that you seem interested about the camp and its occupants. Most of the people are just wanderers or adventurers, here for a safe place to pitch their tent and bed down for the night. They'll be off in the morning, past the clearing's border, never to find the camp again. But there are a few that stay and have lived here for as long as I can remember. You've no doubt at least met one pair of them. The twins, Tommy and Tammy, are definitely the friendliest of us all, and they just seem to pop up wherever you go. Allie here plays the harmonica with such life that the fireflies seem to dance in tune. Over near the stream, you'll see Val sat down with all her birds and other friends, talking to the frogs. Zeke there isn't one much for conversation, choosing to express through his actions, especially with his swing. If you get to see him hit a baseball, keep your eyes on the stars, because that's where the ball's going. And of course, there's Old Man Richie, who keeps us all safe and stops us from getting too rowdy. He's a park ranger of some kind, and a man of few words. What makes him even more interesting is that every day he gets in his pickup and leaves the boundaries, but he always comes back with firewood and food for those of us that stick around. The twins say that he has a map, but I've heard of some rumors that make me think otherwise. What about me? Well, you can just call me Teller, and I spin my tales for anyone that wishes to sit by the flames and listen. I also occasionally leave and come back, but even I'm not sure of how it happens. The first time I left, Richie gave me a wink and a nod, so I think he's got something to do with it. In fact, with all the mystery surrounding him, plenty of rumors and tall tales have sprung up about Richie. But the biggest question is how he got here in the first place. So I figure for your first story at the fire, I'll tell the tale of Old Man Richie and how I believe he came to watch over the camp. Hundreds of years ago, back when kings, queens, lords, and ladies ruled over their lands and when magic was even stronger than it is now, there was a brave paladin named Old Sir Richard. He had long since paid off his service to his lord and now wandered the great wilds between kingdoms, looking for adventure and enlightening those that asked about his patron, the mighty earth-shaper Ganthor, who was an immense mammoth that used his tusks to shape the mountains and carve the valleys. As one who shaped the world, nature was very sacred to Ganthor, and by extension, to Sir Richard. This became very important when one day, as he was traveling through the great Voskotten forest, he came upon a dead hunter and an enormous male deer that had been injured gravely. It appeared that the hunter had been clumsy and brazen in his hunt and had harmed the deer, but he was killed in the ensuing struggle. Sir Richard calmly approached the deer, trying not to spook it as to injure the deer further, or to suffer the same fate as the hunter. Thankfully, it seemed the deer was exhausted from its previous scuffle, and did not react to his approach. Carefully investigating its injuries, Sir Richard determined the deer would likely not live to see the dawn. However, he was a paladin of a powerful nature god, and could use his abilities to save the creature. Sitting cross-legged before the animal, he focused on the ground beneath him and began to draw in energy from plants, animals, and the earth itself. Laying his hands on the deer's injuries, he let this energy flow through him like a river and into the creature. Long did he keep his vigil, for the process took many hours as the energy slowly knit the bones and muscle of the deer back together. When the great splays of the early morning light began to filter through the wood, the immense hardship had been finished. The deer was still weak and still needed to be protected, so Sir Richard kept his watch, giving the hunter a proper burial in the meantime. All day and through the night he was vigilant, observant for threats and potential hungry creatures. By the next morning his mind was foggy and his body weary, but he still kept strong until the deer finally awoke. It slowly rose from its haunches, turned to the paladin, and bowed deeply, showing its appreciation. Sir Robert returned the gesture before they parted into the forest. Long did Sir Richard continue before he finally arrived at the nearest town and collapsed in a bed at the local inn. Restful was his slumber, until early in the morning a dream slipped into his tranquility. It showed a path back into the forest, winding through the underbrush and tree trunks, and into a clearing. In the space were sat many forest creatures, all lying around a single woman dressed in flowing robes with hair the color of the ferns. She opened her eyes and seemed to lock her gaze with the dreaming Sir Richard before he was pulled back through the forest and awoke in his bed. Sensing the dream's importance, Sir Richard stirred himself into action, eating a quick breakfast and restocking his rations before taking off into the woods. Despite never going into this part of the forest, he somehow knew exactly where he was going, and before too long, he pushed through the underbrush and into the tranquil clearing. The grass was soft, and nearby a stream flowed over its bed. But just as he had seen in his dream, there in the clearing center was a woman, surrounded by forest creatures, and one very familiar deer. Sir Richard approached and kneeled before the woman, for she was powerful enough to call out to him through his dreams. She bade him to rise and introduced herself as a dryad lord, a powerful nature spirit that ruled and protected this section of the great forest. She explained that he had healed and defended her favorite pet, the large deer, and as reward for the noble deed, he would be granted a boon. Rising to her feet with an outstretched hand, the grass in front of Sir Richard grew tall and began to wind and braid together tighter and tighter before falling away. There in the ground now stood a perfectly carved wooden branch with engravings of running deer swirling around its shaft. She explained that it was a powerful walking stick that would never break or become worn through use. However, if Sir Richard were to ever come to true harm or danger, he would simply have to break the wooden stick, and he would receive aid. Taking the walking stick in his hands, he bowed deeply to the Dryad Lord and expressed his gratitude before she bowed in kind and returned into the forest, dissolving into the trees with her company of animals. Sir Richard paused, sending a thank you to Campfire for his help, before also turning back into the forest and returning to the town. Upon his return, he spent some days there, learning all he could about the surrounding forest and the Dryad Lords. There was also a feeling he couldn't shake that he needed to remain in town. Not but 2 days later, his hunch proved accurate. As the setting sun kissed the horizon, then did the war horns sound. A large tribe of raiding goblins descended upon the town, threatening its destruction. The local guards did what they could, but they were being pushed back. However, it was then that Sir Richard muscled to the front of the conflict and summoned the powers of the mighty Earth-Shaper Ganthor. He grew in size and drew his sword and shield, shouting a challenge to the goblins. Many began to flee, but most found themselves felled by the paladin's blade. But all too late, it became apparent that this was a ruse, for the surviving goblins ran back to their companions who surrounded a large wheeled platform. Chained to it was a hulking beast of rippling muscle and sharp teeth that struggled against its restraints. As soon as it saw Sir Richard, it loosed an immense roar, and the goblins released its chains. The beast and the paladin rushed to engagement and began their great brawl. Many goblins became caught in the conflict as both combatants traded blows. For each swing of Sir Richard's blade, the monster responded in kind with a great blow of its own. Long did they fight, but it became clear that this was not Sir Richard's fight to win. He knew he had to use the walking stick, but he needed to draw the monster and the goblins from the town. Using the power of a mammoth's charge, he dove into the forest, closely followed by the beast. Familiar with the path, Sir Richard managed to reach the clearing a few moments before his pursuer, using the time to gather himself and face the monster. They locked eyes and slowly circled around the clearing's perimeter until the wind suddenly stopped. The world slowed as they launched forward for one last clash. Meeting head-on, their collision loosed a mighty boom, and the impact blew back the grass. Neither gave ground as sword and claw pushed against one another until the beast revealed a secret. In the blink of an eye, a tail, hidden in its fur, snaked out and slammed into Sir Richard's side, throwing him into a great pine tree at the edge of the clearing with a resounding thud. Seeing its prey battered and broken, the beast slowly paced forward, claws ready, and howled to the sky, prepared to deliver the final blow. But the beast did not see Sir Richard pull a wooden stick from his bag. Getting low, the beast pounced for the kill on the fallen warrior, but as it struck, Sir Richard brought up the walking stick with all his might against the attack. Against the great blow, the stick strained and shattered with a splitting crack. Surprised only for a moment, the beast readied another swing, but paused as the sound of thundering movement filtered through the trees. In an instant, a large group of deer burst from the forest, overrunning the beast and sprawling it onto the ground. Then, as it lay there disorientated, a final creature burst across the threshold. The great deer he had not saved but days ago leaped into the air and lowered its head as it landed. The forest of antlers it brought to bear spared through the chest of the beast, killing it instantly. The deed done, it and the other deer raised their heads and let out a great cry of victory before they disappeared back into the forest's depths. All but the great deer, that is. For it went over to the beaten and battered form of the paladin and simply lay around him so that he may rest comfortably. As it brought down its head, its antlers began to glow a bright green. The air did still and grow warm in the night. The clouds cleared and the stars bloomed. And as the glow reached its brightest, the antlers flashed, enveloping the entire clearing. When the light vanished, so too had the clearing, replaced by the trees that surrounded it. After much time, Sir Richard awoke, resting comfortably against that familiar deer, and saw sat in front of him was the Dryad Lord. She congratulated him on a job well done, remarking that his actions were truly befitting a paladin such as he. He nodded and returned the gift in kind, saying that her boon had saved him and the town. She smiled sadly and told him that he may not be so eager to give thanks. Powerful gifts come with powerful costs, and this case was no different. In order to save him, the walking stick had bound his life to the earth it was born from, and to the creature that saved and protected him. He would live forevermore as long as he never left the clearing long and the great deer came to no tragic harm. However, there was good news in this unfortunate circumstance. With the deer's aid, he could move the clearing across the world to any other forested place so that he may still travel. He would not be lonely either, as the area had become imbued with his nature of aid and protection, and as such would draw weary adventurers and travelers to it for a night of shelter and care. The paladin considered these facts for some time before accepting and embracing the situation. If he were to be given a second life, he would gladly spend it in the service of those that would need him. With that, the Dryad Lord smiled, saying that she would visit him if she could. The two bowed to each other, and the Dryad Lord melted back into the earth, leaving old Sir Richard and the deer to help those that found their way into a camp that was truly nowhere. So, what did you think? I can't verify it's true, but it certainly makes for a good story. Perhaps you can go ask Richie for the details yourself. You might just open up for once. But all of that will have to wait for the next day. The sun has long since set, the coals grow dim, and a good night's sleep comes for us all. Thank you for listening to my story around the campfire of the lost. Good night, and good luck. Hi, I'm Jeffrey Turcott, and I wanted to thank you for listening to the Campfire of the Lost. I write, voice, and edit this podcast as a hobby, and I'm looking forward to making more. As of the recording of this episode, I'm planning on releasing 2 episodes per month on the 8th and the 23rd generally. But depending on interest and response, I might move the schedule up a bit to a bi-weekly release. If this idea entices you, let me know by leaving a comment on the YouTube version, interacting on Twitter, or by coming over to the subreddit, reddit.com/r/campfireofthelost. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you stick around.